Okay, let's get going. So thank you all for joining. I am Karen HERTZ, and I am the founder and owner of HOLIDAILY Brewing Company. We are located in Golden, Colorado, and we are a certified dedicated gluten-free brewery, which I'm going to explain what that is and what that means. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, a little bit about our company, and then I'm going to run through some adult alcoholic beverage options and how they are or may not be gluten-free and some things to look out for. We will run through some shopping tips and some dining tips. And this is going to be a fun hour. So thank you for joining me, and we will get going. So a little bit about myself. I am the founder and owner of HOLIDAILY. I worked in the beer industry for about 10 years, mostly in distribution here in Colorado for Miller Coors. And I have an MBA in entrepreneurial studies. And then I ran into some health issues in my early 30s. I was diagnosed with melanoma. And then I was diagnosed with thyroid cancer and Hashimoto's autoimmune thyroid disease and was told I needed to be gluten-free. And Colorado is a huge craft beer industry. I'm a big sports fan, and I tie beer to a lot of social events. So tailgate parties or Bronco games or Rocky games or après ski are really times that I want to have a beer. And I was trying the gluten-free beers that were out there and felt like the quality wasn't great. And so I started doing some research. Ultimately, this was a project, a selfish project, I would say, where I wanted to have good beer. And I thought maybe other people would as well. And so I started researching ingredients and learning how to make craft beer that was gluten-free, and ultimately opened a brewery in February of 2016. So this is a fun little picture. I have twin girls. They're going to be 13 on Saturday. So thank goodness I have a lot of beer to support me through teenage years. So I have twin girls. This was our brand new building that we opened 5 years ago. We have a tap room here in Golden, Colorado. When we opened, it was 1,200 square feet of manufacturing. Picture on the bottom is my very first brew ever. I will say that I homebrewed and I learned how to brew, but I am not the brewer. My expertise is in selling and drinking beer, not necessarily making beer. So we started with this small system. I did get to be a part of the first brew. Exactly, February will be 5 years for us. It was a 10-barrel system with 20 barrels of fermentation. Our facility from the very beginning has been dedicated gluten-free. We only use gluten-free ingredients, all brand new equipment. And we'll talk some more about certifications and what that means in the safety of beer products. So since then, we've grown quite a bit. When you talk about beer, you talk in barrels. So if anybody went to college, a keg is a half a barrel. And so when you talk beer, it's 1 barrel would be 2 kegs. So we started with that smaller system, and we've just grown a ton. In our very first year, we brewed 257 barrels, and last year we were over 2,100. So we've grown a lot in the last 4 years. We're going to be up again this year, even with the pandemic, which has been a little bit crazy. We have grown. As of last year, we built, you can kind of see in the background on the right, we built a brand new brewery, and that can get us up to 10,000 barrels with the tanks that we have right now. And then there's enough space there to build that brewery up to 20,000. So it's safe to say that our goal right now is to continue growing and getting great gluten-free beer out to hopefully all of you as far and wide as we can. All right, I want to talk a little bit about gluten-free beverage options, adult beverage options. Ultimately, every single one, there is a safe option, and then there's an unsafe option if you are celiac or gluten-free. And so I want to warn you about some of the risks with every single category. And of course, my expertise is more on beer, so I'm going to dive a little bit more into beer than these others. Wine, a couple of things you might think about with wine that could have gluten that you wouldn't occur to you to worry about. Sometimes the barrels that wine is stored in can have a paste that has gluten. So if you ever drink wine and they think it's gluten-free because all the ingredients in there are gluten-free, maybe the barrel had paste. So that can be a tricky part with wine. The FDA just ruled that spirits are gluten-free. And let me tell you a little bit about that, because some people do have reactions to spirits. And ultimately, when you distill a product, that the process of evaporating the liquid, gluten cannot be evaporated. It's too heavy of a protein, so it stays down and the rest of the alcohol evaporates. So if a distillery were to take the evaporated liquid, which a lot of them do, and that's what they utilize in their spirits, that is a gluten-free product. But some of them have additives afterwards, where it might be for coloring, that have gluten in them. So when you go to shop for spirits, I would ask about, are there any additives in this? Because that's where people will get sick from a spirit. It's not from the distilled process. That is why the FDA is ruling spirits as gluten-free, is because out of that process, that evaporation process in distillation, gluten can't do that. So that's a little bit on the spirits news. Ciders, most all of those ingredients are gluten-free. I would be sure to ask, is it a dedicated gluten-free facility? We're going to talk some more about that with a beer. And then this new seltzer craze, I want to talk about those too, because those are risky in a couple of ways. A lot of seltzers are made on lines where beer is made. So a lot of them may be cross-contaminated. When you are brewing, a lot of us think about the tanks, but there's hoses between the tanks and clamps that hold the hoses and instruments you put into the tanks to test the liquid. All of those things have to be cleaned in a facility that produces regular beer, or something with gluten and something that doesn't. And I think it's really easy to miss some of that cleaning process. And so anything where it's produced on traditional lines and then they produce a gluten-free product is a risk for cross-contamination. And almost every cider is that, or seltzer is that, because most of these seltzer companies aren't just seltzer. They come from a brewery. Things like Mike's Hard Lemonade are made with barley. So be real careful with seltzers. We're going to talk about yeast in the next slide, because every single one of these has yeast, and yeast is a tricky ingredient that a lot of manufacturers don't know about. On the right, I showed some gluten-free beer. This is in our tap room here in Golden. And I will walk us all through what's risky in gluten-free beer, and then what to look for to ensure that you're drinking a safe product. All right, this is my most boring slide, and we'll get through this, and then we're just going to sail on. So real quick, yeast concerns are in every single one of these products. And like I said, a lot of manufacturers don't know that yeast can be an issue. So the reason is yeast itself is gluten-free, but it can be propagated in a glutinous environment, meaning it's fed glutinous food. So for example, a lot of traditional brewers yeast is not gluten-free because they make it themselves. They propagate it themselves off their own beer, which is barley based. They can test it, which is great. But it's just a product that you have to be real careful. They're propagating it in a safe environment. And there are safe options for it. They exist. And so when we go to brew, we make sure that we're getting all gluten-free yeast to brew with. And yeast is in every single alcohol. So just be aware of yeast. And, if there's a manufacturer that states they're gluten-free and you're not really sure, I would call and ask about that product. All right, so like I said, there's all those liquors. And just one thing real quick, I will get to questions at the end if that's okay. So my screen is kind of funky where all I can really see right now is my PowerPoint. So when I am done, I'll go back and go through any questions. So please feel free to ask and we will get through them. So like I said, that was kind of an overview of all of the different options. And I do think there's risks in every single one, but I also think every single one can be safe. research, obviously, we're all gluten-free or allergy consumers, so we understand that we need to do our research. But I'm going to dive into beer because this is really what led me to start this company and what we focus on here at Holidaily. So I say gluten-free-ish beer options because there is kind of a scale, and to me I put it in 4 buckets, the different kinds of gluten. And the first one is gluten-reduced beer. And I don't know if you've heard of this style or even knew that this wasn't gluten-free. But these beers are made with barley or wheat, and then an enzyme gets dropped at the end into the product at the end of the brew cycle. And what it basically does is it takes a gluten protein and chops it into pieces. So the gluten's actually still in your beer, it's just in very small pieces. So my best visual example for this is think of like a beaded bracelet. So that's your gluten protein. And then this enzyme comes in and chops the string, and all of the beads are in your beer, basically. And there are people who can consume those small pieces and be safe. And there are people that can consume those small pieces and not feel very good. So the issue with this beer and the testing piece of it is they do test at less than 20 parts per million. But what they're finding is that what's happening is these pieces are smaller than the test can pick up, but they're actually still in the beer. So there's scientific evidence that the gluten is still in there and the allergen is still in there. And that is why if you've had some of these beers, they maybe didn't make you feel too good. So a lot of these labels, they are not allowed to label this beer as gluten-free. They label it as crafted to remove gluten or crafted to reduce gluten. So when you're shopping and you see that label, that means it is not a gluten-free beer product. It is a gluten-reduced beer product. It is a risk for sensitive consumers. Omission is probably the biggest brand of the gluten-reduced beer that's out there. So the next bucket I put gluten-free beers in are gluten-free beers that are made with all gluten-free ingredients, but they're produced on lines that traditional beer is made on also. So we talked about this a little bit already, but in these facilities, they might run a traditional IPA, and then they clean the lines, and then they run their gluten-free blonde or whatever it is. There is a risk of cross-contamination in these beers. They can be labeled as gluten-free. So, this is another place where research is important because the beer can be labeled as gluten-free, but not necessarily in a completely gluten-free environment. It's similar to any of the snacks that we might eat that's say produced in a peanut facility. It's the same thing. It's produced where barley is, and another big risk in these areas is even just dust from the barley. So grain dust is really hard to control, and that can be another big risk in these facilities where they do both traditional beer and gluten-free beer. A lot of times, we talked about this too, seltzers are made in this area because it's beer companies that are making seltzers. Ultimately, seltzers are they use sugar rather than grain. Some can use barley, but ultimately it's a beer company that's making a seltzer, so there can be cross-contamination risks there. All right, dedicated gluten-free facilities. So these are breweries that all they make is gluten-free beer. So they don't do the gluten-reduced, and they aren't cross-contaminating with traditional beer. They're using all gluten-free ingredients. Their facility is gluten-free. Their brewery is gluten-free. So they are minimizing cross-contamination risk. The beer can be labeled as gluten-free. And I have a map I'll show you in a little bit, but there's 15 of these across the country, including Holiday. All these breweries do and make and focus on is gluten-free beer. And then my fourth category that we put breweries in is a certified dedicated brewery. And Holidaily is one, really there's only 2 of us in the US right now. We do, in order to be certified, and it's on all our packaging, we have to do annual audits, we have to do testing requirements, we have to do training requirements with our whole staff. We do put the logo on every package that we have. there's no risk of cross-contamination. Our brewers cannot eat a sandwich in the brewing facility. Like, we're real serious about this. Every single piece of equipment we've ever purchased is brand new. I don't want to deal with one little grain being caught in any little crevice. We buy everything brand new from our packaging. Our canning line is completely our own. Some breweries do, it's called mobile canning. So they might go, they pull up a truck to a different brewery, can their beer, and then leave. It's, this mobile canning business. Some of the gluten-free breweries do that. They have cleaning guidelines in order to minimize any cross-contamination risk, but we don't do that. We do everything at HOLIDAILY. Our entire brand relies upon people being safe, and I want people to be safe. So the certified dedicated gluten-free facilities are when you're shopping and you want to be completely sure that you're safe, that's your best option in terms of beer. Challenging ingredients in beer. So, I was working at Coors and loved beer and was told I needed to be gluten-free. And so I started looking into what in beer is the issue here. And really, there's 4 ingredients in beer. And it's grain, hops, water, and yeast. And hops and water are gluten-free. So we're good to go there. Yeast, I put a yellow arrow on for exactly what we talked about. We just need to be sure that we're sourcing yeast that is propagated in a gluten-free environment. But obviously, we got a problem with the ingredient on the left here, and that's barley. So a lot of beers, most beers are made with barley and wheat, and we can't utilize those grains. So when I started searching for ingredients and looking into what people were using for gluten-free beer to replace the grain at that time, a lot of breweries were using syrups. So sorghum syrup or rice syrup, and if you've had a sorghum beer, it's real sweet, not a lot of body, and I just didn't like it. Didn't taste like beer to me. And I did a search for gluten-free grain options, and at the time, the only company in the world that was making gluten-free grain or malting gluten-free grain for brewers to use was 60 miles from my front door in Wellington, Colorado. So that was kind of a sign to me, like, I can't believe they're this close. It was the only one in the world, and it's a woman-owned business. This is Twyla, and it's called Grouse Malt House. And Twyla's kind of changed my life. She's brilliant. We're here in Golden, Colorado. It's an old mining town, and people say, oh, the miners must have made all this money. And I say, no, the shovel makers, they were the ones that made the money. And I call Twyla my shovel maker because HOLIDAILY doesn't exist without Twyla. So I found her, like I said, she's an hour away, and she's malting gluten-free grains for people like HOLIDAILY to use in our beer. And every single beer that we make right now consists of a combination of buckwheat, which is the one that kind of looks like chocolate chips on the chart, and millet. And she roasts them, she malts them, and it allows us to make a variety of beer, really any style of beer that we want. It's just a matter of time and experimentation at this point. But it's a great quality ingredient that she makes. She's gluten-free certified as well. So her farmers have to use all dedicated equipment. And really, when we're thinking about HOLIDAILY or a brewery, got to go as far back as the farmers. What equipment are they using? What's our malting house using? Is that a cross-contaminated facility? And all of that is covered. She's certified, we're certified. So we go that far back to ensure that what everyone's drinking is safe. So millet and buckwheat is what we put in every beer. We talked about the U.S. gluten-free breweries. These are the dedicated gluten-free breweries that all these guys make is gluten-free beer. So there's 15 across the U.S. HOLIDAILY is in Golden. A large portion is in Portland and Seattle, and then they're kind of sprinkled throughout. When HOLIDAILY opened 5 years ago, we were the 5th in the U.S. So it's grown quite a bit here. There are states that none of these breweries distribute to yet. So there's room to grow, really, for all of us. There's over 8,000 craft breweries in the U.S. and only 15 gluten-free. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for all of these people. And it's a great group of people. We actually had a conference yesterday with all of them, and we kind of have built this really cool gluten-free brewing community. All right, why gluten-free matters. This one is really focused on retailers. So if you own a bar or a restaurant, these are kind of some of the things we talk to bars and restaurants about, which is, consumers are looking for this certification. They want to know that the product is safe. This is the new gluten-free certified logo that just came out. So we will be transitioning our labels with this new logo. The gluten-free consumer, and if you're gluten-free, you understand this, or you're married to someone that is, or related, they really are the influencer on my group. So what I talk about is, I'm gluten-free, I'm the high maintenance one, but I'm with 10 of my friends, and we want to go out to dinner. I generally get to make the choice of where we go, because they need to be sure they meet. My group wants to be sure I can eat or have something safe. And so while you may sell, a couple of gluten-free beers, you're going to sell everything else to all my friends. So the actual power and influence that the gluten-free or food allergy person has on a group is really important, and something you don't want to ignore, because either we won't go at all or we won't stay very long in that facility. So having great gluten-free options is really important right now. Just a couple other statistics on the power of being certified and making sure the products are safe. 80% of people feel safer eating in an establishment that's certified. 95 will go back. They're likely to try a new restaurant or go back. So it's just important that the consumers know that we're being safe, and that the products that you have or you're serving are safe for them to consume. And that not only brings them to your establishment, but their group. All right, some shopping tips. So you're out at the grocery store or the liquor store. Here's just a couple of things I put together when you're shopping for gluten-free beer. It could be in a number of sections in stores. So you go to the gluten-free beer section and it's not there. Don't think it's not there. Like, ask the people where it may be. So we've done displays with cheese companies in a totally separate section, or different gluten-free products we have done displays with in stores. So it could be totally in a different section than you would think. But a lot of times there's a gluten-free section, and it might have ciders and gluten-free beer and gluten-reduced beer. That's a good place to look. Because a lot of these breweries are small and local, maybe it's in the local craft section. It could also just be in the regular craft section. So ask around. If it's not where you think it is, they may still have it just in a different section. To increase your safety, just avoid labels. If you're sensitive, let's say crafted to remove or reduce or any of that, because science is showing that it's still in the beer, and if you're sensitive, you can get sick from this beer. So if it's labeled gluten-free, it's likely one of those other categories where it's all gluten-free labels. If it's certified, then they go through rigor to really ensure that it's safe. Certification is the most reliable. If a company has a variety of gluten-free beer brands or styles, they're more likely to be a dedicated gluten-free facility. And what I mean by that is, here's all of Holidaily beer brands. So year-round, we have a blonde, an IPA, and a stout. And then we rotate seasonal SKUs. Right now, our pumpkin beer is out. So there's a lot of style options from Holidaily. And the reason is that's all we focus on is gluten-free beer. If you're another brewery and you just want to throw out one gluten-free beer, you probably only have one style. It'll probably just be a blonde or a pale ale. Something relatively easy to brew, just something to have a gluten-free option. So if you see on the shelf a company that has 3 or 4 brands, it's most likely a dedicated gluten-free brewery, because they're putting all the resources towards having different styles. So we right now are distributing these. We have 10 on tap in our tap room, and every single one is gluten-free. We continue to experiment. We'll continue to launch new beers out in distribution, and that's because that's all we do. So that's one way to identify some of these dedicated gluten-free foods. Here's some dining tips too. So if you're out to dinner or lunch, some things to think about, and this is, overall gluten-free, but menu verbiage and staff knowledge is so important. I mean, you guys know now some questions to ask. Do you have a gluten-free beer? And they say yes, and you see the crafted to remove gluten brands out there. Then the staff probably isn't very educated. Or you guys, you're out at a restaurant and things are labeled gluten-free, or they have a separate kitchen. That will usually indicate that they know the importance of safety and they know what they're talking about. So I'm always looking at menus. I'm always asking staff questions. Know those gluten-reduced brands to avoid. Just like I said, you ask if they have gluten-free beer or you see it on a menu. I mean, sometimes on a menu it'll say gluten-free and then it's one of those crafted to reduce gluten beers. Unfortunately, it's not technically legal for any menu to label those as gluten-free or any liquor store, but nobody's monitoring it right now. So it's really up to us as consumers to know what to look for and make choices around that. Draft line concerns. So something to think about with gluten-free beer and even cider is when it's on draft, there is a risk of cross-contamination. And the reason is we have our IPA's name is Fat Randy's IPA. And New Belgium makes a beer called Fat Tire. And the bar's busy and the Fat Randy's keg kicks and they hook it up, or the Fat Tire keg kicks. So the bartender runs behind to the cooler and switches out the keg of Fat Tire and hooks up a keg of Fat Randy, and now that beer is contaminated. So beer on draft is tricky, and it can be contaminated if they hook it up to the wrong line or they don't clean the lines well enough. So we are careful to put beer on tap. In general, outside of our own brewery. We have breweries that carry us, and I trust them because they know their beer and they know how to clean tap lines. In our contracts with our distributors is an actual statement on the level of cleaning that has to be done for any beer that goes on tap of ours. So it's actually in our contract. So just be a little bit weary if you're going to order beer on tap. You can even ask them, like, often are you cleaning your tap lines? Are you sure the line is clean? Are you sure the line is dedicated? Is a great question, meaning the only thing they put on that line is gluten-free. And human error is an issue. Go back to the Fat Tire and Fat Randy's story. I have been at a bar where I order Fat Randy's IPA, my husband orders Fat Tire. Between the bar and our table, the wait staff mixes them up. One thing that I generally ask for if I know they have a packaged beer of ours, I say, can I have the can and a glass? And I either want them to pour it right in front of me or I'll pour it myself. But it helps assure me that I'm getting what I ordered. So when you think about brewing or you think about Holidaily, a lot of people are focused on the brewing piece of it. Oh, it's dedicated. It's a dedicated facility. But for me and for Holidaily, we have to think of this entire spectrum to have a safe product. And that's everything from the farmer to the malt house to our facility, how we brew it, how we package it, getting it to the distributor, how it's served at the bar, all the way to your table. And we really try and ensure as much safety as we possibly can from the very, very beginning till you're drinking our beer. And I think these are just some things to look out for when you're dining. And like I said, it might be a cider too. Ask them, is the tap line cleaned or is it dedicated just to cider, just to ensure you're getting a safe product. I do want to answer some questions. Let's do that first. So let me get out of here and see if I can't get to questions, and then I'll probably put this back up so you guys can see, and we're going to do a giveaway too. So let me get there. All right. See me? All right. Let's start at the top. thank you guys all for being here and interested in listening about Holidaily and gluten-free beer. It means a lot. All right. Scrolling through these. So I did answer this question earlier. One of the questions was, am I related to the Hertz car company? And the answer is no. I married into the Hertz family. I think if I was part of that, the Hertz rent-a-car family, I'd be on the beach somewhere in the Bahamas. But I'm real happy to be here at Holidaily too. So good. The people are having beer. That's a great question. Yeah, so cheers if you're having a beer. I'm happy to have you joining me. All right. All right, yeah, so someone wrote, there's only about 3 gluten-free beer options in my area. Like I said, there's 15 dedicated gluten-free breweries in the U.S. There's a couple imports, so one in Canada called Glutenberg, and they're in a couple places too. There's one called Greens, and they're a dedicated gluten-free brewery that imports, and they make some good beer too. But like I said, that map that I showed, and we can go back and look at it, they're pretty spread out, and a lot of them are pretty little. Some of them are open only on Tuesdays for drive-through. Some are shut down right now with COVID, so they are smaller breweries that aren't distributing. They might just be a tap room. We are the largest gluten-free brewing facility in the country, and working on getting our footprint out bigger. So it's just a matter of time and people being able to brew enough beer to distribute further than they are right now. And know that it's my goal to get it to all of you someday, as soon as we can. So there's questions about getting beer to you guys right now. As of right now, we don't have a way to ship beer. There are some laws around direct to consumer, but it is something that we're looking at and working on. So keep an eye out on our social media because we are hoping we can start doing some more direct to consumer shipping. It's laws by state. So some states don't allow it. More are allowing it right now with COVID. So I'm hoping that we can get beer direct to consumer. The only states that we are in right now, distribution wise, are Colorado and Arizona. Right. Someone's drinking a Fat Randy's IPA. I love it. There is a gluten-free brewery in New Hampshire. I think it's in Vermont. And it's called Red Leaf. So look up Red Leaf Brewing. They're new. They're a new little guy. And they make dedicated gluten-free beer. So someone had asked about Northeast. That is one that is up there. Someone had asked about Corona. So Corona is actually brewed with barley. It's part of this testing issue where I do think it's a lower gluten beer, but in no way, shape, or form is Corona or any of the light beers out there gluten-free. So just know, absolutely not. They don't even use gluten-free ingredients. They're not testing it at all. I would not, it's sad to say because God knows I loved Corona in my previous beer drinking life, but it is not a gluten-free option. So yeah, there's lots of questions about Illinois, Oregon. Right now we cannot ship you beer, but stay posted on our social media and I'll share that with you. So distributors, this is kind of how distributors work. So there's breweries, then there's distributors, and then there's retailers like grocery, liquor store, restaurant, and then there's the consumer. And so in order to get to legally even sell beer in another state, we have to sign a contract with the distributor. So a lot of my job is going out and meeting with distributors and saying, hey, we're different than anything else you sell. We have this great gluten-free product. These people in Arizona really want our beer. They're asking for it. I have to go through you to get it to bars and restaurants or liquor stores. And then it's, are they willing to take us on as part of it? So, and then we sign a contract with them. So a lot of my role is picking places that we get asked a lot for beer. I think that gluten-free beer would do really well in. And then I go meet with different distributors in those areas and say, you know, are you willing to be our partner? Are you willing to help us sell this beer? But we can't, legally, we cannot go into other states and distribute our own beer without a distributor. So that's how that relationship works. And that's really a big part of my role is going to meet with those people. So you can let us know on our website where you'd like to see Holidaily or where you'd like it shipped to, and that can really help guide me into where should I be approaching distributors. Let me see. So yeah, how do you know if beer seltzer is brewed on the same equipment as gluten beer? That's a great question. And ultimately, I mean, you have to call the manufacturer. Some of these guys, like I believe White Claw is starting to build their own facility. So it will just be seltzer. But right now it's brewed on other equipment. Like Mike's Hard Lemonade is produced in the same place, and Mike's Hard Lemonade has barley in it. So I'd call the manufacturer and find out, you know, say I live in this state, what brewery are you manufacturing my White Claw at, and is that completely gluten-free or is it not? Let's see. Yeah. So someone joined a little bit late on the seltzer, and I'm happy to talk some more about that. The risk in seltzers are, one, they can be produced where barley, beer, or other barley malt beverages are made. And then the other risk is yeast, and is the yeast propagated on a gluten medium versus gluten-free? And I don't know all the details for every single seltzer on what they use, but that's a question worth asking the manufacturer about. I don't know of any gluten-free beers in Dallas. Someone had just asked me about that. Great partners for us and in other gluten-free breweries are like a Whole Foods. They're good places to look. We talked a little bit about where to look in liquor stores. Some of the bigger chains like Total Wine, they have lots of, or Bevmo, you know, some of the bigger chains, they tend to bring in every option. But like I said, it may not be in the gluten-free section. It could be in the local section. So it's worth asking their staff if they have anything, and then being real careful not to buy that crafted to remove label. Really be looking for gluten-free labels and gluten-free certifications to be safe. Good question here. What's the difference between gluten-reduced and gluten-removed beer? Nothing. Just a word that I feel like is very misleading. Gluten-removed beer, it's not removed, to be honest. So it's exactly what we talked about before. It has a gluten protein. They use grains that have gluten in the beer. They use barley and wheat. And then it gets chopped into pieces, and the pieces are still in your beer. Why someone said it's okay to call it gluten removed is I don't know. But it is not removed from your beer. And the tests that we have currently are not sensitive enough to pick up those tiny pieces. And we all know as sensitive consumers that it can still impact some of us. So I can't drink gluten-reduced beers. So it's a great question. It means the same thing. Crafted to remove gluten and crafted to reduce gluten is the exact same thing. I don't know why people would choose one over the other, and I actually feel like the word remove is a little deceiving. And, you know, I don't know why gluten-reduced beer, the intention of gluten-reduced beer was people really thought it was an answer, and it was going to help us all get to have regular beer. And it wasn't to trick people. It really was to give people an option. And then unfortunately, people were getting sick and didn't really know why. And then they found out, oh, it's not really removed, and the tests aren't good enough to pick up these small pieces, but really sensitive consumers are still getting sick. And so the initial intention was not, it wasn't poor. It wasn't meant to be mean. It actually was meant to give us an option. It just didn't work. It's kind of like there's no shortcuts. You have to do this the right way to make a safe product. And ultimately in beer, if everything going into the beer is gluten-free, then what is coming out is gluten-free. And so for us, the testing isn't, yes, we test every beer on the end, but the testing is actually on every ingredient that goes into our beer. Where in a gluten-reduced beer, they're just testing it at the end. So ultimately, the gluten-reduced thing, there's not a peanut-reduced category of foods, so I'm not even totally sure. To me, it's either gluten-free or it's not. Yes. So a question about Angry Orchard. Angry Orchard states that they are gluten-free and they test their cider making equipment for cross-contamination. I would say yes, they're safe. I don't know if they are certified, but it sure seems like that's a safe product and all their ingredients would be safe. And they have awareness enough to say, hey, we're not only testing the product, we're testing the equipment. And that would make me feel more. Great question here. Someone had tried some seltzers and didn't feel good. And some make me not feel good. And I really think it comes down to probably the yeast that they're using or contamination on the equipment. Let's see. All right. TTB or FDA use the purity law as a statement of identity for beer? If yes, do they recognize the use of buckwheat or millet in this part? This is kind of tricky. So FDA ultimately is our ruler for labeling because the TTB defines beer as barley based. So we consider ourselves a beer. It's a grain, water, yeast, and hops. FDA says it is. They have some certain different labeling laws than TTB. I don't know if that answers that question. What it basically means is our labeling, if we were made with barley, our labeling rules would fall under the TTB. But because we don't use barley, we fall under the FDA. Question about Redbridge. So Redbridge is made by Anheuser-Busch. They are gluten-free. All the ingredients are gluten-free. It is made in their facility that traditional beer is made. So that's one that, a couple things on Redbridge. It's made out of sorghum syrup, which we talked about, those ingredients. It's gluten-free. I just feel like the quality of the ingredients isn't as great as actually using grain, like a real. But I would think that they go through some pretty rigorous testing to make sure it's gluten-free. It is made on equipment that traditional beer is made on. So that might be a lookout for that. Yes. So people that you've tried things, you thought they were gluten-free, and it turns out they're not. It's probably one of those few things, whether it's yeast or cross-contamination, or even the barrels that we talked about with wine or spirits that can have gluten in the paste of the barrels. Welcome. Thank you guys for listening. Let me see what else. I don't know the answer to champagne yeast. Brianna, you are welcome to email me this question and I will do some research if you want that. Anybody too, I'll share my email. Total Wine in Massachusetts, come here. Yeah. Yep, Bevmo in Arizona, we are in there. Okay, there was a question about our promo code not working. I will check on that. And I'll share our link to our booth for the festival this weekend. We are doing a deal in the tap room if anybody's in Colorado or wants to come visit. Yeah, someone's in Tucson. We're so happy to be in Arizona. Can keep getting further. Brewery near Maryland is Red Leaf. I got set up. Troy, you said you had an answer. Let's see. Nothing in the Southeast, nothing in Tennessee yet. All right. Sorry if this has been asked. We have a place that says that the enzyme in some of their beer removes the gluten. So that's exactly what we're talking about in that this is a gluten reduced or removed beer. And remove is, I don't trust that word in this particular process because this is beer that's produced with barley or wheat. An enzyme gets dropped in and it takes the barley or wheat protein and cuts it into pieces. But it's actually, the gluten is actually still in it. And the best visual I can give you that I shared a little earlier is like a beaded bracelet. And think of that as the gluten protein. And you cut the string and all the beads are still in your beer. When they test those beers, they test at less than 20 parts per million. But scientifically, it has shown that the gluten is actually still in your beer. The tests just aren't picking up those smaller pieces. And so people, if you're sensitive, people can still get sick from that beer. There are some people that can drink it and say they do okay. And I get people in the tap room who are celiac and are like, yep, I can drink juice beer. And I get people in the tap room who don't feel like they're really sensitive and they get sick with gluten-reduced beer. So if you want to be sure you're getting a safe option, I would get a gluten-free beer. If you want to get the safest option, it's a certified. Can I give you a list of gluten-free beers? Yeah, I can give you a list of gluten-free breweries. So on that map, I can run through the names of them. Probably the widest spread is Ghostfish Brewing. They're out of Seattle. Groundbreaker Brewing is out of Portland. Other ones, Red Leaf we talked about. Alt Brew is in Madison, Wisconsin. Aurochs Brewing is in Pittsburgh. Neff Brewing is in Tulsa. And then there's a whole bunch in Portland and Seattle. Beerly Brewing is up there. Cold Crash Brewing. Moon Shrimp Brewing. Who else? Glutenberg is out of Canada. Greens is out of Belgium. I don't want to forget anybody. So there's 15 on that list. So here's a Corona question, and I've had a couple of those. So Corona does test low on gluten, but it is absolutely made with barley. And they don't claim it's gluten-free. They say it's low. It is not a gluten-free beer product. So I drink HOLIDAILY, of course, most of the time. I would drink any of these dedicated breweries. I would drink their beer. So if it's labeled as gluten-free, I would feel pretty safe about it. The ones that are brewed on cross-contaminated lines, I'd be more careful about. And then I don't ever drink Corona. Love Corona, definitely miss it. Challenge our brewers to a Mexican lager regularly, but I can't drink it. Right, Corona is not safe. It's part of that test where it's low, but the tests at the end product aren't sensitive enough to pick up gluten, and people are getting sick. You cannot get HOLIDAILY in Austin, Texas yet. How can consumers reach you? Yeah, we can set up meetings. I'm going to share my email. So you guys are welcome to email me, and I'm available to set up meetings, tomorrow or this weekend or whatever works for people. So if you have more questions or want to talk more about any of this, I love talking beer. Let's do it. Let's see. Let me share that slide so you guys have all the information. There's not a lot of gluten-free beer in California yet. Someone had asked that. There are a couple of breweries that may be opening in the next year. So be looking for some of those, and hopefully some of us will be, getting distribution out that way too. It's kind of crazy. Someone said, love you, Holidaily. Love everybody. Thank you guys for listening. Oh, it's Erica. Hi. Okay, someone said, send a message that says the private chats aren't working very well. So I can see messages. It's a little bit harder for us to see, but I can see your notes. It looks like I answered most questions. All right, so let me share this last slide real quick because I want to talk about a couple of things. We're doing a giveaway, and all my contact information is on here. Our social media, our marketing team is amazing, and our social media will keep you up to date on anything we're doing distribution-wise, if we're getting some new placements. Our website is up to date if you're in Colorado or Arizona with where you can get HOLIDAILY. My email is here, so it's khertz@holidailybrewing.com. We are on all of these social media outlets, so whether it's Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, please go follow us. You can find out any updates. A lot of times we'll talk about, ingredients or anything new that's been found with gluten-free. So go follow us, and we're going to have a giveaway around it too. That where to buy link is right there. And then we have a deal going on right now, which is if you buy a flight of 3 beers in our tap room, you get 1 pint for free. So if you live in Colorado, come see us. This is through the weekend. And then we have our booth online too. If you want to come, something to do for the weekend, come visit us. So here's the deal for the giveaway. If you go follow Nourished Festival and you follow HOLIDAILY, and then you tag us in a post, we are going to do basically a swag pack giveaway. So we will mail you a swag gift pack. We will pick a winner on Sunday night. So if you go out on social media, follow, again, Nourished, it's at Nourished Festival, and follow at HOLIDAILY Brew, and then tag us in a post. We will be picking a winner on Sunday with some good swag. Here's a list I have, and just something else to note. As far as the promo code, you use it in person in our tap room. So someone had said it wasn't working. Here's a list of the dedicated gluten-free breweries in the U.S. Alt Brew, that's in Madison, Wisconsin. RX Brew is in Pittsburgh. Beerly Brewing is outside of Portland. Burning Brothers is in Minneapolis. Eckert Malting and Brewing is in Northern California. Evasion Brewing is in Portland. Ghostfish Brewing is in Seattle. Groundbreaker Brewing is in Portland. HOLIDAILY Brewing is in Golden. Moon Shrimp Brewing is Portland. Neff Brewing is Tulsa. Rolling Mill, it's Midwest, but I don't know if I know exactly what city. Dos Luces is in Denver. Red Leaf we talked about, Vermont, and Cold Crash is in Seattle. And we can post that. I think we actually posted about it because we had a conference with all these guys yesterday, but we can post that on our social media so you can go check out all these breweries, support these guys. A lot of them are really, they're similar to HOLIDAILY in that they really want to get great quality gluten-free beer out to the world. Please feel free to email me, khertz@holidailybrewing.com. You can also email info@holidailybrewing.com and it will get to me. But if you want to, we can set up meetings tomorrow. Like I said, throughout the weekend, even next week, we can set up a time to meet if you guys have any further questions for me, or you can come have a beer with me in Golden sometime, which I would love to. All right, I'm going to stop sharing this. We have this document will be available for you guys to see So you can pull that as a resource. And then we have another document that we posted out there that it tells you the difference between gluten-free and gluten-reduced. So it's a really easy, just one-page sheet. If there's anything else that we can provide, let us know, and we can share any of our tools that help. Someone said it's super blurry. Basically, we are at Holidaily Brew. If you tag Holidaily Brew and at Nourished Festival in a post, you'll be in the drawing for some swag. And if you need my email, it's khertz, KHERTZ, at holidailybrewing.com. I can type it in here even. There is my email if you want to reach out to me or have any other questions. Have about 4 more minutes. Is everybody good? Cheers. Everybody, get a beer. Cheers. Thank you all. Yeah. Caitlin's our marketing manager on here with the details on the Nourished Festival and Holidaily Brew. Please come see me someday in Golden, and hopefully we'll be getting beer out to all of you in the near future. Cheers.